Hello, so welcome back to this final session. In this session we're going to wrap up our scene with our lights, but just before that, I know we've already covered the glass and specularity on glass. There's one final thing that I'd like to mention is to create the effect of dirt and smudges on glass or on other surfaces to surfaces that have got specularity. Again, this is kind of a beginner level work, so there are more advanced versions of this, and as you progress, I'm hoping that you will kind of be able to layer shaders and so on and so forth, primarily an intermediate level. But anyway, so we've got this object. I just want to keep a copy of this so that we can refer back and forth. So we select our object, apply a shader, and it's going to be Arnold standard surface. I'm going to call this M dirty or dirty glass. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to apply a preset, which is just the glass. There's a problem with Arnold. Let me just check. Let's go to our preset again. Here we go. Now we've got a clear glass. I'm just going to pick that portion. Now what I like to do in the previous example, so we've got a glass with a bit of a kind of the feeling of thickness slightly, but it's got a coat on it, so we don't have clear glass per se. We've got thick glass, and it's almost like there is another finish on top of it. And what we're going to do with that, we'll leave the specularity as is on this one, and we are going to excuse me. The transmission is set to 1, so it's clean, as in it's see-through. We're going to go to coat, and this is the one that we're going to focus on. I'm going to just increase that to 1 for now, and let's see what we get. So if I just turn it off to show the difference quickly, I'm going to turn it on. And then what I'm going to do, excuse me, I'm going to change the color of the transmission. So we get something like that. Maybe a bit more, a bit of a higher value. Something like that. Now we've got the coat on it. Gives us a bit of a thickness, for example. We've got a color on the transmission, so that's quite good. We leave the specularity as is. And with the coat, the index of refraction, which is how we want, how much, the way we want the light to be distorted. So if you click on it, we can go for glass, for example. That's one thing we can do. We can also play with this to get more of a distortion if we need to, so we can increase that. And you've got your highlights become more prominent. But default is the glass, and it's the same thing on the specularity. When you click on this IOR, index of refraction, you can see the refraction, in other words, how much light to be distorted, or the refraction is to do with the distortion of the light, so we can select those options. Now we can live with this as is, but if you want some dirt on this one, What we can do, because we are mainly focusing on the roughness, almost like the top layer, in this case the top layer is the coat, so you've got specularity underneath and then you've got coating on top of it. It's like a metallic car paint. It's almost like you feel like there are multi-layer colors. Under the roughness of the coat, let me just keep a copy of this so we can compare. We can click on it, and then what we'll do, we'll pick a black and white color. Let me just go and find that texture. I think I put it somewhere around here. So we're looking for, let's say, something like this, which is a black and white, in other words grayscale color. I'm just going to turn this off, and I'd like to show you the image. Something like that. It's like a distressed, dirty texture that I found on a free texture site. You can have your own versions with just simple scratches, for example, but this is to kind of show that there is dirt on the glass. And when you bring roughness in Arnold, things that you have to do, first of all, make sure for the roughness the color space is set to raw. It's like the normal map. And also we have to pick the alpha luminance, and then we'll play. I'm going to take the resolution back to 100 so we can see it clearly. What I like to do is focus on the glass, the bottle a bit more, so we can see clearly. Now you already see some dirt there, so we can compare. So you can see these smudges and things like that. Now we can try and reduce not that one. Transmission a bit, and you can still see those smudges on there. So that's kind of how you would add a roughness texture. You could have fingerprints on them, you know, to get the effect of a dirty glass. Then again, remember, for roughness and also for specularity, any roughness that comes to the specularity or the coat, make sure the color space is set to raw, the alpha is luminous, and the effect also can be further enhanced and controlled in the exposure or the color gain and color offset settings. So that's that one. I've got the other ones that I like to bring in. This one. In this one, we're going to go for, again, a glass preset. I like to go for glass quickly. Oops. And we can isolate that selection when I click on it. Well, because we don't see the background, there's not much happening, but we can see the highlights. I'm going to turn it off. What we can do with this one, we can set the transmission color, say something like a bit of a green color. It's good to keep as much as you can saturation and the value between 0.3 to 0.6. Too much of it gives you some fake effects. we can. Actually 0.9, sorry. Something like that. We can do, for example, with this one, we could, in the transmission, you've got depth, for example, say if I set to 0.1, and that will increase and decrease the depth of the transmission, something like 0.1, let's say. And then you've got scatter. If you want something like a bottle with some murky water in it, the water could have these values anyway. Or initially, if you want to fake it, you can have a scatter color. So let's say if I pick, just to make my point, there is something like that in it, or another layer, in other words. Give it a bit of a thin layer. So that also there's one thing you can do, for example, in here. You can utilize the roughness in the transmission, which is called extra roughness, and that you can see it gradually adds that roughness to the bottle. So you can play with these to make it a bit more thick, almost a bit more frosty with like dual layers, for example. You can turn that off. Again, the other roughness, the same roughness that we applied here, we can try it on the specular color, the roughness of the specular color. Let me just turn this off. Raw, no filter. Let's go and find it. And alpha is luminous. So now you've got this effect. So this roughness, it hasn't been applied to the coat. In other words, almost like the dual specularity. This one has been applied directly to the specular channel. It's been plugged into the specular channel's roughness, and you get that kind of an effect now. So it's a different bottle now. Okay. Ultimately, we can play with this a bit more. With the scattered color. Now you get these kind of effects. So the depth and the scatter will work hand to hand to create that kind of a murky look. There is something in it. The roughness will obviously disperse focused specular highlights, and you can plug that into the roughness of the specularity or the coat to get the desired effect that you're after. And we can do more with this. I don't like the scatter on this one. And in fact, I can play with the coat a bit. And maybe add a bit of a sharp green highlights. Come back to that. And then there's one more. This one. So with this one we're going to go for a clear glass. And then we've got the cork. With the cork we can go for a color texture. I don't like filters. So with the cork texture we can utilize, we can bring a normal map from Mudbox, have a bit of a grain there for example to have that effect, or we can simply try and use any inbuilt textures that we've got, anything that we can take advantage of. Now for bump maps they're not going to be quite effective, but, you know, if you want a normal map you have to go and create one. But for now we can utilize, let's say, an inbuilt one. Some of these black and white textures like fractal and noise in Maya don't work well with Arnold, so you can utilize Arnold's own ones, but we can try this fractal, see what we can get. So that's the effect we are getting. I'm just going to hide this. And with the fractal out there, I'm going to reduce the bump a bit. If I copy the tab, I can make changes without selecting the wireframe, as in the mesh, so we can see it. In Maya you can copy a tab, and when you deselect your object, that tab will remain there, so the wireframe on shaded is not going to confuse you. Something like that. Now this mesh, the UV, has been organized in a way that, you know, like this. Because it's already been UV'd, it's difficult to do procedural texturing because you've got this UV seam out there, and as you can see, when we do make changes, we've got this problem. Now for something in distance, for example, we can get away with it, but ideally it will be good to use our own noise textures and being aware of it. When we use the inbuilt ready-made ones, they're generally designed for primarily things that are not UV'd and the procedural stuff. So, you know, it's difficult to break that seam, so it's better to paint in another application. Let's try to see whether we can find our own inbuilt noise. I'm just gonna get rid of the we broke the connection. That's how you do it. So I'm gonna break the connection here, go back to it and trying to find the noise texture. Something like this, see what we get. I think yeah, that noise texture will suffice. And also one more thing, if you've got a texture that can be tiled, we can also increase its numbers, the number of, we can repeat it several times, because right now we don't see the effect of the noise too much. Let me copy the tab. So we can say the number of UVs, let's say 10 by 10. So we have this repeated pattern. Then again, we're still getting the same problem out there, but we can live with that. Let's go and reduce the amount of the bump. 0.4, for instance. 0.3. There's too much there. You don't see that much on a cork. 0.2, maybe 0.1. Yeah, that should work. That's that one. And let's bring our last hidden mesh. We've hidden the glass. Display show last hidden. It's this one. And let's take a render of this. Now that everything else is quite dirty, let's add a dirt texture to this as well. Let's see what we get. So under the coating, let's leave it there. Let's see what we can apply to the roughness of our specularity. Mind you, we can play with both. Let's see what we get. So we get something like that. I want to isolate that, like this, so we can let that run. If that's not the desired effect, well, we can maybe just to leave it clean and clear. I mean, in terms of its transmission, we can just break that off and maybe have a bit of coating on it, plug that into the roughness of the coating. Because I want the glass to be a bit clear. You can let that run. And I'm gonna try and change the, let's set that index of refraction. And with the specularity, I might just want to I might just do the scratches. Let's see what we get. I made it completely like a frosted glass. I might have to reverse that. So let's see what we can get. Just going to try and reverse those colors. This is not giving me what I want. I think the roughness on the texture is too much. I mean, I'd rather control it from here perhaps. Leave the coat. I should be fine with that. Now there are ways in which you can break these highlights off and go for more of those highlights to be ever so slightly, well, not necessarily the highlights, we can actually break this off and push them towards the edges a bit, and you have that kind of an effect based on the camera angle. You can kind of have this thing called Fresnel effects, and through another Arnold utility called facing ratio, we can do that. But that's kind of intermediate level, and I want to keep this as is. But there is a way to push it, where we can push this area and still have a bit of a glass, see-through glass, without much of these highlights. It's picking up a lot of the lights around it, and it gives us this highlight. So it's kind of a different glass. And this one, it's the same thing that we've done up here. So let me just go through it. The transmission color is set to blue. It's like it's almost like a perfume bottle. Specularity is set to 0. You know, it's fully transmissive, so it's glass. I've added a bit of a depth to it to have a bit of a thickness there. Left the scatter color black. Added a bit of a roughness to the coat. Increase its index of refraction on that one. You can see we get a different effect. So it was 1.6, wasn't it? So that's that one. And finally, what I like to do is now we're gonna get rid of the existing lights that we have, because that was just purely for so that we can see our mesh. And what I like to do, start with especially if you're going for realism, start with a dome light, which is this one, and then I want to plug in an HDRI under its color node. No filter, and let's see what we got. This is going to be indoor. I might pick this one, and this shows how the HDRI can change the color of the HDRI can change the mood. In other words, the color of the lights suddenly can change the mood there. So the assumption is that we are in some kind of a lobby area somewhere, or some kind of a pub perhaps, and these are on a shelf somewhere, and the environment, the lights and the walls and the colors, and they're all kind of reddish warm colors, but we still see the bottle. So this is kind of a start for us. So that's kind of the overall environment, and what I like to do then is start thinking about this. Like, for example, now you can use light blockers. You can put a box around this where it blocks all the lights, and you can decide where to let the light through, and so on and so forth. You can put some polygons up here to create the effect of a window or something like that, but I'm just going to leave it open for now. So what we're going to do, we're going to bring an area light, an Arnold light, facing that way, something like that. That's our window almost, and I want the the shape of the light kind of to drive the overall effect, the look of the light. So I'll just play this. In fact, I'll go to test resolution 50% for now, so that we can get a quick feedback. And with the light, we can increase the exposure. Now, one thing you can do, if you really want the shape of the light to drive the intensity, you can turn off the normalize. Now it's massive, so let's go back to 1.4. So you get this. You can do that, or as I said, if you don't want that, if you think that you don't have much of a control over the exposure, you might end up hitting the minus values. You don't have to. You take it back 10, 15, and let's say this is kind of one of your key lights coming from the window. And the other thing we can do, we can increase its resolution in terms of its quality. So 1224, I think. Actually, so it's double of that amount, initial amount. And also, we can say that we would like to reduce its spread. It's going to be more focused. So it's like it's coming from a window, an opening there, almost, and it's almost like the window is as wide as the shelf itself. So we now reduce this spread, but it's more focused. we've got that kind of an effect. Again, you can play with the exposure, because when we have other lights coming in, you don't want them to compete with one another too much. So that's kind of one of our key lights. And again, you know, you can increase that. You can even change the color. Say if you're imitating some kind of an open sky bluish color, pick this one, a bit desaturated maybe. Now you've got that effect. And what we're going to do then, the next thing is, so we are inside the pub or the lobby or somewhere, and we're close to a window somewhere, or you know, maybe somewhere around here there is a door there, and so on and so forth. But there are other bounce lights going around, so we can put another light. And this is where our camera is. It's a direct shot. It's not too it's not interesting. We can change the angle a bit more later on, but let's put the lights in here. So that's kind of a bit of another light. And with that light, let me just select it. Whilst the light is selected, we can start tweaking the values. So let's start with an exposure of 10. And yeah, we can see the dirt, we can see this bottle with some roughness on it, we can see this one, and certainly that one, and we can certainly see the effect of the key light coming in from this direction. One other thing, just finally, what you can do is to make it a bit interesting. I'm just going to apply a standard surface shader to those, just one thing. We're not going to see them, and I'll reduce their specularity and make them a bit of a grayish color or something like that. So let's see if we can see the effect of those. I'm just going to update my scene, and in fact I'll hide this light. I want to see the effect of this light. Maybe I should just cover that up completely so that we can control it a bit more. And I'll go to the shot cam, see if we can change the angle a bit. Yeah. Let us put this in a bit more. This in line with the glass. I turned off the environment light, the overall dome light for now. I wanted to see why we can't see those shadows much. I think they are overpowering, the environment light is overpowering the shadows. Let me set this spread back to what it was, see what we get. No, it's not giving us what we want. I didn't want to play with this too much. I don't want to take your time too much, but let's see. I'll take it back to where it was. Come on. Yeah, the spread is too high. It kind of spreads the shadow way too much. Let us see what we can do with that. One final thing I can do is rotate it a bit. Perhaps a spotlight would have been better, but let's see. Yeah, I forgot to rotate it to give it a bit of an angle, so it's like sunlight coming in. Okay, so I'll bring in now the environment light. see what we get. And this light, we can increase its exposure a bit more. And in fact, why not give it that kind of an angle, so maybe we can see the shadows on the wall. Something like that, let's see. Okay. And finally, we had another light somewhere. That will kill off those shadows a bit, but we'll see. And we'll do an overall render, just a quick one. Yeah, I think the light that is facing the objects, this light effect can be reduced or toned down, or the environment light, and we can take advantage of the key light overall if we want. But for this scene, it's okay. The next thing I would do to put some extra assets around here, not necessarily just close to the wall, to get a bit more variations around here, or maybe somewhere there to get a bit more of a different effects, to break some of these off, to make it interesting. Another option would be to, as I said, to block off, to put this scene into some kind of a cube, where we only let the light through windows or an opening or something like that, to make it more of a dramatic effect rather than being out in the open. Okay, so yeah, this is it really. I let this run. One final thing, as I mentioned before, is that to gain a bit of a render time, and also to make sure that that you don't, if you don't want to maybe use the post denoising. Remember, in one of the videos I talked about when you finish your render, if you still have noise, you can go to utilities and Arnold denoise, but this is kind of a post denoising. This is like photo retouching almost. But if you don't want to have that, and then you want to just have what you see in Maya, but you get noise, what you can do, you can go to individual lights. Let me just grab a copy of this. You can go to individual lights and increase their samples. So let's say if I take the samples of this light to, I'm going to focus on this area mainly to start with. if you increase the samples to 2, for example, so it clears up the noise a bit. We can pick an area there. And I can pick my light again. So you can isolate those lights and see which ones are actually creating noise. The same thing applies to this one. I'm selecting the actual sky dome light, and then we can increase the sample of this one to 2. And also the area light that we had, that we got it to act like a sky or light coming through the window. We can increase its sample maybe to 3. That's kind of acting as a key light, and then we can let it run. So those increases in the sampling will break off that noise. Ultimately, it's better to work with the samples in here rather than in the render settings. Yeah, I'm not gonna keep you here, wait till this is finished. I will just put a finished picture. When you increase these samples, especially the samples on the lights, as I said, it will break off the noise. If you've got volume in your scene, i.e. if you're trying to create guard rays and light rays and stuff like that, using a light, and you get noise, increase the volume samples, and that will also kill off some of the lights. It's still going on, it's still trying its best. I might tweak the specularity on the glass on this one. I get some fireflies there. Maybe the depth, I can kill that off. The rest seems to be okay. We're still going through it. Okay. And that's still going on, so it's still rendering those areas. I think this part is almost done, because we're still on the 7-8% now. You might say, well, you suddenly increase your render time, but trust me, if you were to try to get rid of the noise using the render settings here on an Arnold renderer samples around here, for example, that would have been a problem. Now, if you don't have subsurface scattering, orange and candles and grapes and stuff, and you can turn this one off a bit to gain some render time. We don't have it, but we've got the rest, or you can leave them as they are. Those are the default settings. So I'll let this one render, and I've already mentioned it several times how to render your final image, but just to give you a final tutorial so that you don't forget. So if you go to your render settings, under the Common tab, just make sure you set your render to shot cam. In other words, if you've got a camera, make sure it's HD 1080. Under the Arnold renderer, blah blah. Well, hang on, let's go back to common. Here we go. If you're gonna do post denoising, merge your AOVs. Click on that one. Arnold renderer. Under the denoiser, output denoising AOVs. Make sure that's clicked. Because we are only doing single renders, we're not doing an image sequence as such, so that's fine. And then all you have to do, go to your render sequence option box, check the camera again, specify where you want to save this render. So in my case, images, I'm going to call this bottles look dev. Actually, that's the location, not the file name. And then you just click on render sequence, and it's going to do, you can stay away from your computer, and it's going to render your scene as an EXR file. That's the one that you can submit, especially for the single renders. If you're going to take your EXR to a blog or something like that, to PowerPoint, I mean, they're quite heavy files. It's better to take them to Photoshop, set their bit depth to 16 or less, because they're 32-bit images, they're high resolution images. So make sure you have, when I say high resolution, they're images with 32 bits, 32 million colors onwards. So it's better to convert them to some kind of a TIFF or a JPEG or PNG perhaps. And that's how it's going to run on a website, or if you're going to put a part of a blog or something like that. So anyway, this is going to continue. This is it really. So most likely I'll get a result that is close to this with the noise removed. Don't get the Maya render view to confuse you. That's just Maya coming in. What you see here is not actually what's going to come out of Maya. It's going to be better because this is just some random stuff that Maya does when it talks to Arnold. So ignore that. Okay, so that's it really. Thank you for listening.